First, imagine the impossible: the Earth's spin stops. For a moment, the familiar rhythm of day and night ends, frozen in silence. One side of the planet would face the sun endlessly, its skies scorched with unbroken light, while the other would sink into eternal darkness. The air itself would begin to shift, pushed and pulled by temperature differences too immense for life to endure. The oceans, no longer guided by the planet's rotation, would surge outward, forming towering waves that sweep across continents. The calm balance that has shaped every sunrise and tide would be gone, replaced by a world of extremes. If Earth were to stop spinning suddenly, everything not fixed firmly to the crust would continue moving eastward at hundreds of meters per second. The atmosphere, the oceans, even people and cities would be flung forward with unstoppable momentum. Mountains would not save anyone. The air itself would become a storm. This isn't just a shift in weather, it's a rewriting of physics as we know it. The Coriolis effect, which gives shape to hurricanes and ocean currents, would vanish. Winds would no longer spiral, they would rush straight from one extreme to another, chaos following in their wake. Over time, if the planet somehow stabilized after such an event, the pattern of life would reshape itself entirely. The side facing the sun would become a desert of glass and fire, where water would boil and stone might crack from endless heat. On the far side, where light never returns, temperatures would drop so low that air could freeze to the ground. Between these two worlds would lie a thin band of twilight, a dim, habitable strip where the sun forever hovers near the horizon. Here, in the eternal dusk, life might cling to existence. The Earth's magnetic field, which depends on the motion of molten iron within its core, could begin to falter without rotation. That invisible shield that protects us from solar radiation would weaken, letting cosmic particles pour through the atmosphere. The sky on the day side might shimmer with auroras not just near the poles but across continents, beautiful, deadly curtains of charged light. Technology, satellites, and even DNA would feel their touch. The planet would glow faintly, not with warmth, but with exposure. Seasons would lose their meaning. With the rotation gone, only the slow tilt of Earth's orbit around the sun would define any change, but even that would feel alien. There would be no days, no nights, no rhythm to sleep or growth. Plants would struggle. Photosynthesis would either overwork or cease entirely. Forests on the bright side would burn to dust, while those in the cold side would freeze into wooden sculptures beneath sheets of ice. The world's green breath, oxygen, would fade. The oceans would retreat toward the poles under the pull of gravity. Without centrifugal force balancing the equator, water would migrate, leaving dry basins where tropical seas once shimmered. Entire coastlines would be redrawn overnight. The Pacific might empty partially toward the Arctic, revealing a floor that hasn't seen air for millions of years. Coral reefs, mangroves, and coast-dwelling creatures would perish. What remains of life would scatter, following thin threads of survivable temperature and light. Time itself, though unchanged in physics, would feel different. With no sunrise or sunset, hours would lose purpose. Cultures built on the passage of days would dissolve into confusion. The concept of a morning or evening would vanish. People, if any survived, might measure time by the beating of their own hearts or by the cooling of the air around them. Clocks would tick meaninglessly, their rhythm unmoored from the cosmos. Civilization would be forced to reinvent how it understands existence. Gravity would feel subtly different. Currently, the Earth's spin creates a slight outward force that makes people at the equator lighter than those at the poles. Without rotation, that tiny reduction disappears. Suddenly, everyone would weigh just a little more. It's a quiet, eerie change, one you wouldn't notice amidst the chaos, but it marks how even the smallest aspects of daily life are shaped by motion. The still Earth would be heavier, more solid, less forgiving. If Earth's atmosphere somehow remained intact, weather patterns would stabilize into two extremes. On the day side, constant heating would draw air upward endlessly, forming gigantic, planet-spanning convection currents. On the night side, that air would descend as frigid, dense wind. The resulting flow between sides could create a permanent storm along the twilight line, a roaring ring of thunder, lightning, and endless wind, circling the planet forever. The world would hum with imbalance. In such a frozen moment, the moon's influence would also shift. Our tides, born from the moon's steady pull, would lose their gentle rhythm. Without rotation, the timing of tides would change drastically, perhaps locking into place. The delicate dance between Earth and Moon, the same dance that has guided navigation, emotion, and poetry, would falter. Even the night sky would seem strange. Constellations on the dark side would remain forever fixed, while those on the light side would fade into the glare. The very idea of daydreaming under a moving sky would become a memory. The sun would never rise or set, it would hover forever in one spot. On the bright side, shadows would never shift. On the dark side, the stars would not twinkle with movement. Human psychology, tuned so deeply to cycles, would begin to unravel. Without change, without transition, minds would grow weary of sameness. Despair and confusion would spread like slow, silent waves. Over centuries, if humanity found a way to survive in the twilight zone, life would evolve anew. Generations might build cities beneath protective domes, powered by geothermal energy and the remaining winds that flow between extremes. Crops could grow under artificial light, water recycled endlessly. People might live in harmony with the dim horizon, never seeing a true sunrise again. Myths would form, tales of the world that once spun, of the sun that once moved, of days that had beginnings and ends. The continents themselves might shift subtly. Earth's crust, freed from the slight bulge at the equator, could slowly deform, changing the shape of oceans and mountains. Volcanoes might awaken as pressures redistribute. Earthquakes could ripple across the world, marking the planet's slow adjustment to its stillness. The surface, once lively with motion, would groan as it settled into its new form. A geologically quiet world might follow, but only after centuries of chaos. Animals, if any endured, would adapt in wondrous, eerie ways. On the bright side, perhaps reflective scales or thick hides could evolve to shield against the relentless sun. On the dark side, creatures might develop luminous organs, glowing softly to find one another in the frozen night. The balance of predator and prey would depend on light itself. Evolution would sculpt beings of brilliance and shadow, guardians of two eternal realms. The air along the twilight belt might take on strange qualities. Constant mixing of hot and cold could create shimmering layers, bending light and distorting sight. Travelers walking that path would see mirages, false horizons, phantom suns, ghostly lights in the distance. The sound of wind would be constant, whispering through mountains and plains, carrying dust from the day into the night. It would be a lonely sound, a reminder of motion long lost. The loss of rotation would also end the familiar hum of the planet. Seismographs, which now record the subtle vibrations of Earth's spin and tidal forces, would fall quiet. The heartbeat of the planet would fade. In its place would be a deep silence, so complete that the human mind might struggle to bear it. Every sound would seem louder, every echo longer. The world would no longer hum, it would hold its breath. Even the stars would seem to slow down. On the dark side, they would hang unmoving, their eternal positions giving no hint of time passing. The concept of navigation by stars would become useless. Sailors of the old world would have no bearings here. The cosmos itself would feel frozen, the illusion of eternity made real, but at the cost of motion, of change, of life's pulse. Civilization, if reborn, might find beauty in stillness. Artists could paint landscapes where dawn and dusk are forever one. Philosophers would ponder the meaning of time in a world that no longer turns. Music might slow into long, haunting tones, mimicking the endless stretch of day. Humanity might adapt not through conquest, but through acceptance, by learning to live within the hush of an unmoving world. Yet deep within the planet's molten heart, movement might persist. Though the crust stands still, the inner core may continue to swirl, generating flickers of magnetic life. These slow inner tides could whisper of the world that once was. If rotation were ever to begin again, perhaps triggered by some cosmic force, the Earth would awaken like a sleeping giant, stretching after an age of stillness. To imagine all this is to glimpse how delicate our balance truly is. Every breeze, every tide, every heartbeat depends on that silent spin beneath our feet. The Earth's rotation is not merely motion, it is the rhythm that holds all rhythms. Without it, we do not simply lose day and night, we lose the pulse of the world. And so, in this imagined stillness, as the planet halts and silence takes over, we understand something profound: movement is life. The spin of the Earth is not noise, it is the quiet song beneath everything we know. To stop it, even in thought, is to listen to the universe hold its breath. The first breath after stopping, everything keeps moving. The Earth may have halted its spin, but inertia has no mercy. The oceans still surge, the air still rushes, the cities still crumble under invisible motion. It's as if the planet itself has exhaled all at once, and that breath becomes a storm that encircles the globe. Skyscrapers bend, forests fall flat, and mountains echo with a roar unlike thunder, a sound of motion without balance. The planet's crust, firm for eons, shivers as energy transfers through its bones. Even in stillness, the world refuses to be still. The oceans, heavy and unchained, sweep across continents with unstoppable force. Waves taller than mountains race toward the western edges of every landmass. In mere hours, coastlines are rewritten, and what once were cities become blurred memories beneath swirling depths. The air above the seas grows dense with salt and mist, and as it moves, it scrapes the planet clean. Ships are lifted, trees are torn free, and the horizon becomes a wall of grey. Those who once trusted the steadiness of the ground now learn that the air itself can crush. In the skies, the atmosphere lags behind the Earth's sudden stop, turning wind into a weapon. At the equator, air once traveling at over 1,600 kilometers per hour rushes forward, invisible and relentless. It doesn't howl, it screams, flattening everything in its way. From space, the planet might seem calm, but below, a global tempest unfolds. Dust from shattered continents rises high, wrapping the Earth in shadow. The sun's light becomes fractured, a dim haze over chaos. Amid the violence, heat and cold begin their slow war. On one side of the planet, the sun burns down without rest, heating oceans until they steam and crust until it cracks. On the other, the darkness deepens, swallowing all warmth. Within days, frost begins to claim mountains and plains alike. Rivers freeze solid, their surfaces reflecting distant starlight like mirrors of regret. The two halves of the Earth, one scorched, one frozen, define a new, terrible symmetry. And yet, somewhere between the extremes, a narrow strip of balance forms. The twilight zone, a place where day and night meet in eternal hesitation. Here, winds never stop, but neither do they kill. Here, the sun forever lingers near the horizon, painting the sky with endless dusk. Perhaps, in this fragile band, life might cling to existence. Seeds carried by the storm find soil that neither burns nor freezes. Creatures crawl from the wreckage, following faint warmth and dim light. The survivors of humanity, if any remain, might gather here, drawn by the promise of something livable. They would build shelters from the ruins, use remnants of technology to measure the unchanging sun, and learn to sleep without darkness or dawn. They would whisper stories of the world that once spun, of clocks and calendars, of morning routines and evening stars. Their eyes, no longer blinking against sunrise, would grow used to the endless glow of twilight. But even here, the balance is uneasy. The atmosphere, struggling to find a new rhythm, churns endlessly. Vast cyclones, anchored to nothing, twist along the twilight band like ghosts. Rain falls in torrents and then vanishes for weeks, replaced by dry winds that smell of ash and metal. The soil shifts, rich with minerals but poor in life. The plants that survive do so by adapting quickly, roots that dive deep, leaves that close against the wind, stems that bend but do not break. In the light side's eternal day, strange deserts begin to form. The ground cracks open, releasing old secrets, fossils, minerals, memories of a spinning past. Lakes evaporate into mist that rises and never returns. Mountains cast shadows that never move, and within those shadows, perhaps, small pockets of life persist, blind creatures hiding from a sun that will not set. They move slowly, learning that patience is survival when time no longer moves forward. On the frozen side, the air itself begins to freeze. Nitrogen and carbon dioxide form icy crystals that shimmer faintly in the dark. The ground becomes glassy, slick and soundless. The silence there is total, no wind, no voice, only the faint crackle of distant shifting ice. The stars above burn bright and cold, unblinking. To stand there would be to witness eternity, but not the kind that comforts, an eternity that reminds you how fragile warmth really is. Electricity still dances in the air. The Earth's magnetic field, though faltering, flickers with the remnants of its power. Auroras spill over both hemispheres, glowing in impossible colors, crimson, violet, green. They drift across the still sky like whispers from the core. To the few who watch them, they seem almost alive, as if the planet's soul refuses to dim entirely. The light feels sacred, the last heartbeat of a living world. And then comes the dust, fine, endless, golden gray dust carried by the dying winds. It settles over everything, dulling colors, muting sound. The air tastes of iron and silence. In some places, it piles into dunes that glimmer in half-light. In others, it clings to the ruins of towers and bridges, burying humanity's fingerprints. Time, now meaningless, still moves in the slow work of burial. The earth erases itself with patience. The survivors, sheltered within deep valleys or artificial domes, begin to adapt not only physically but mentally. Without night, the body forgets how to rest. Without sunrise, the mind forgets how to hope. People begin to live in cycles of light and shadow that they create themselves, artificial darkness, mechanical dawn. They invent time again, but it no longer belongs to the cosmos, it belongs to their will. Humanity's greatest instinct, to measure, to organize, to dream, flickers on. In the centuries that follow, nature slowly reshapes around stillness. The winds calm, oceans settle into strange new basins, and the crust cools. New climates emerge, the frozen lands become stable ice worlds, and the bright side becomes a sea of glowing minerals and steaming basins. The twilight zone grows wider, fed by drifting clouds from both sides. Life, ever persistent, evolves anew. The earth becomes quieter, but not dead, just different, endlessly adapting. Somewhere within the twilight, perhaps a single forest survives, trees with silver bark and glassy leaves that catch what light remains. Beneath them, pools of clear water shimmer with faint luminescence. The air hums with insects unlike any that once lived, creatures that glow softly as they move through mist. It's peaceful, strange, and hauntingly beautiful, a reminder that even disaster can yield wonder. Humans who endure may come to see the earth not as ruined, but reborn. They tell stories of the turning time, when the planet moved and life was easy. Children grow up without stars that shift or shadows that change. They see the fixed sun as eternal and think of motion as myth. The past becomes legend, the idea of a spinning world as foreign to them as the concept of flight once was. But deep within their dreams, echoes remain. Some nights, though nights no longer exist, they feel the phantom pull of rotation, a memory their bodies cannot forget. It's in the rhythm of their heartbeat, in the pulse behind their eyelids. The earth may not spin, but they still do, little universes of motion within the still world. Their dreams are filled with movement, running water, setting suns, drifting clouds. As generations pass, civilization reshapes its meaning of beauty. The eternal dusk becomes sacred. Art celebrates stillness. Music slows until each note lingers like a breath in the cold air. Architects build with symmetry to honor the balance between day and night. The world becomes quiet, thoughtful, a reflection of endurance. Humanity learns not to dominate the planet, but to adapt to it, to listen to its silence. Even as they find peace, the old questions return: could the earth ever spin again? Could motion return to the stillness? Scientists and storytellers ponder the idea, building theories around remnants of energy deep in the core. They imagine machines that might stir the planet's heart, reawakening its rhythm. But most are content to let it be. The Earth's stillness has become their lullaby, and its silence their home. The atmosphere thins with time, yet life persists. Plants release oxygen sparingly, conserving what little balance remains. The seas, though shallow, reflect the half-lit sky in hues of violet and bronze. The stars overhead never shift, but their reflection in the water ripples with the faintest wind. The planet, though unmoving, still breathes slowly, patiently, like a sleeper who dreams. And one day, after centuries of calm, something stirs deep below. A tremor ripples through the mantle, gentle, almost kind. The survivors feel it not as fear, but as recognition. Perhaps the earth, in its timeless quiet, remembers what it once was. Maybe it isn't truly dead, only resting. Maybe it dreams, too, of turning once more, just as we dream of the dawn that never comes. For now, though, everything remains as it is, the world caught between fire and frost, silence and wind, memory and forgetting. The first breath after stopping continues, a long exhale that never ends. And in that endless breath, the earth and all who remain find a strange peace. The universe keeps moving, even when the world no longer does. A howl of wind and a great rearrangement of the seas. That is how the stillness announces itself, not quietly, but with the kind of force that seems to tear at the edges of the world. The oceans, once guided by the calm rhythm of rotation, now surge in chaotic rebellion. They no longer know where to go. The water heaps itself toward the poles, drawn by gravity's unrelenting call, leaving vast plains of mud and bone at the equator. The wind howls across the exposed seabeds, carrying salt, sand, and the ghostly memory of waves that will never return. The once familiar boundaries of continents dissolve beneath the movement. New coastlines emerge overnight, carved by water that no longer listens to the moon. Rivers reverse their flow, cutting fresh paths through lands they once nourished. Mountain valleys become inland seas, while deserts transform into temporary basins filled with brackish, restless water. Everything changes, maps become useless, and the human concept of geography unravels in hours. The sound of the shifting earth is everywhere, a deep, endless groan beneath the screams of the wind. In the skies, the air remains wild, no longer bound by the Coriolis force that once shaped storms. Winds blow in straight, deadly lines from the scorching light to the frozen dark. They strip away forests, peel soil from the crust, and carry it across half the world before dropping it as fine, lifeless dust. The twilight band becomes a restless ring of atmospheric warfare, endless motion along the line where the sun forever hesitates. The world breathes through wind now, rough and loud, like a creature trying to remember how to live. Where the seas retreat, the Earth's hidden stories emerge. Ancient shipwrecks lie exposed beneath the open sky, their wood dried and pale. Fossils, long entombed beneath layers of sediment, glitter faintly in the weak light. Minerals once buried deep begin to oxidize, painting the ground in streaks of red, gold, and black. The planet seems to bleed its own history, each color a memory of the motion it has lost. Silence settles between gusts, heavy and knowing, as if the Earth mourns its own stillness. On the bright side, sunlight reigns without mercy. The oceans there, too shallow now to protect the land, turn into vast mirrors that boil at their edges. Steam rises in curtains, wrapping the horizon in shimmering haze. The surface becomes a glass desert, a world of blinding white reflections and heat so intense it bends the air itself. Shadows are short and motionless, they cling to objects like scars. Here, the sun is not a giver but a destroyer, patient and constant. On the far side of the world, the darkness grows denser than ink. The air thickens as it freezes, pressing down on the land with a quiet weight. The seas there harden into fields of ice, not the blue-white of our old poles, but black and crystalline, reflecting the stars that never move. It's a world of still beauty, haunting, frozen, and absolute. The ice cracks sometimes, with sounds like the moans of an old ship. Underneath, creatures move slowly, guided by the faint heat of the planet's core, blind to light but alive all the same. Between the heat and the cold, the twilight line trembles like a scar between worlds. Storms walk its length, vast and unending. The wind there speaks in tones both high and low, a chorus of movement against the planet's stillness. Lightning flashes constantly, painting the horizon in electric veins. Here, rain falls in strange rhythms, thick drops that freeze midair before striking the ground, or mist that rises upward instead of falling. The boundary is alive, a restless frontier between survival and desolation. Those who endure here live by instinct and adaptation. Humans, perhaps only a scattered few, have learned to build shelters that lean with the wind rather than fight it. They draw water from mist and warmth from buried vents. They live beneath metal domes that hum softly against the storms. Their world no longer turns, but their lives still flow, each heartbeat a tiny defiance of the still earth. They tell stories not of time, but of balance, of finding the quiet rhythm within endless motion. Across the dim horizon, the sky glows faintly green from the remains of auroras. The magnetic field, weakened but not dead, continues to dance when charged particles strike the atmosphere. It's a gentle reminder that the planet still breathes, even if slowly. These shimmering lights become symbols of faith, seen by those who venture outside their shelters. The auroras whisper of the core that still turns deep within, like the dream of a world that refuses to fade. Over generations, the new oceans at the poles begin to stabilize. The frozen one becomes a kingdom of silence, its surface reflecting the constellations that never change. The heated one at the opposite pole steams endlessly, its waters a churning cauldron of chemical reaction. Between them, the air flows like a river, always moving, always shifting temperature. Clouds form strange patterns that stretch halfway around the world, their shapes frozen in a rhythm that no longer knows day or night. Where there were once forests, now stand fields of stone. The trees that survived have grown differently, twisted, thick-skinned, their leaves like scales. They no longer rely on seasons, they draw energy from geothermal warmth or reflected light. Some glow faintly in the dim air, storing the sun's eternal light in slow pulses. The animals that feed on them move with deliberate grace, conserving energy, their eyes adapted to half-light. The earth, though broken, has not surrendered, it simply reshapes itself around the new truth. The seas, rearranged and stubborn, begin to carve new pathways into the crust. The constant shifting of weight causes the earth to tremble. Volcanoes rise where pressure builds, spewing ash into the twilight air. Lava rivers flow through the dim landscapes, their orange glow painting the ground with warmth and danger. This molten motion is the planet's last attempt at movement, a slow, internal reminder that nothing can truly remain still forever. In the sky, the sun never sets, and the stars never rise. It is a perpetual in-between. The concept of a horizon changes, no longer a place where sky meets earth, but where light fades into shadow. It's a border not of distance, but of endurance. The few who still travel follow it endlessly, seeking better air, warmer ground, or the remnants of the old world buried beneath layers of dust. They walk toward a destination that never arrives, guided only by the memory of change. With time, the oceans begin to whisper again. Their tides, though faint, are pulled by the moon's steady hand. Even in a world that no longer spins, the lunar rhythm persists. Waves lap gently at frozen shores, and a new equilibrium emerges, one born not from motion, but from persistence. The moon, faithful as ever, continues its orbit, circling the quiet earth like a guardian. Its reflection shimmers in polar seas, a reminder that some dances never end. Humanity's traces fade beneath layers of sediment and frost. The cities crumble, their ruins half buried in salt and ash. Metal rusts, glass clouds over, and concrete becomes stone once more. Yet beneath the decay, life stirs. Tiny plants push through cracks, nurtured by thin sunlight and stubborn roots. The new world grows slowly, without hurry or noise. It doesn't need to be what it was, it only needs to be alive. In the silence that follows the great rearrangement, sound becomes precious. The wind's howl is no longer a terror, but a song, the earth's only voice. The few who survive learn to listen to it like a language. It tells them of the distant storms, the shifting air, the faint quakes beneath their feet. They respond in whispers, honoring the world as a living being, even in stillness. It's a fragile piece, but it is real. And somewhere, deep below, the molten heart continues its slow churn. Though the surface sleeps, the core dreams of motion. Tiny vibrations ripple upward, too faint for life to notice. Over millennia, they might grow, reshaping the crust again. The planet may one day find its rhythm once more, not through chaos, but through the slow patience of geology. The earth is old, and even in stillness, it remembers how to dance. Above the twilight lands, clouds drift endlessly in the same direction. They carry moisture, dust, and memory. The world's weather becomes predictable, soft in its monotony. And yet, beauty lingers in the glow of lightning, in the shimmer of frost, in the calm that follows every storm. The rearranged seas glitter faintly at the poles, like mirrors placed at the edge of existence. The earth has changed, but its heart, unseen and silent, still beats somewhere in the dark. Those who gaze at the frozen stars begin to understand a strange truth: even stillness has movement hidden within it. Molecules vibrate, heat transfers, light bends. The absence of rotation doesn't mean the end of motion, only its transformation. The world, it seems, has not died but entered a new kind of life, quieter, slower, but enduring. Perhaps that is the secret the universe keeps, that nothing truly stops, not even when it seems still. In the end, the howl of wind fades into a sigh. The oceans rest in their new homes. The rearrangement is complete, and the earth, though changed beyond recognition, finds balance again. It no longer spins beneath the stars, but it continues, patient, scarred, and serene. The seas, once wild, now whisper softly to the shore, as if telling the planet it has finally learned to breathe in stillness. And above it all, the universe turns, eternal and vast, carrying this quiet world within its endless motion. The sun's rhythm would change, long days and long nights. The world, even if it somehow kept turning slowly instead of stopping entirely, would feel the shift in every breath. Days might stretch into weeks, and nights could linger for months. The familiar pattern of sunrise and sunset would dissolve into drawn-out transitions, skies that glow for hours before dawn, and dusks that never truly end. Time would feel heavy, sluggish, as if light itself were struggling to move. The balance between warmth and cold would break, reshaping every season into something alien. On the side where day reigns, the sun would hang high for what feels like forever, pouring down heat without rest. Crops would wither, soil would bake into hard clay, and rivers would shrink until they cracked like broken glass. Cities would grow unbearably hot, their air thick with shimmering light and dust. The sky would turn from blue to pale white, a colorless veil of exhaustion. The earth would begin to glow faintly at night from stored heat, unable to release what it had gathered through endless exposure. On the other side, darkness would arrive and refuse to leave. For weeks, or even months, the sun would never rise. The world would cool, then freeze, then harden into silence. Lakes would become mirrors of ice, forests would stand still beneath heavy frost, and creatures would vanish into burrows or caves to escape the killing cold. The stars would hang motionless overhead, filling the long nights with quiet wonder. But that beauty would hide a truth. Without the sun's return, everything would begin to sleep forever. Life caught in between, in the zones of twilight, would cling to survival with desperate grace. Here, dawn would last for days, a gentle amber light that never quite becomes morning. Shadows would stretch endlessly, and the air would hum with strange calm. It is here that survivors might find a kind of peace. They would live in slow cycles, planting during the long light, harvesting before the endless dusk, and resting through the prolonged night. Their lives would move to a rhythm older than clocks, older than history. The sun's changing rhythm would change everything humans know about time. Clocks would lose meaning when a single sunrise spans half a lifetime. People might measure existence by the growth of plants, the shifting of stars, or the cooling of the wind. Days would no longer define work or rest, energy would. Societies might divide not by borders but by light, some choosing to dwell in the slow warmth of the sun, others retreating to the quiet stability of eternal night. Humanity's relationship with time itself would have to evolve. The ecosystems that remain would fragment. The plants of the bright lands would adapt to store moisture for the unending day, their leaves folding inward, their colors bleaching to silver. In the cold lands, mosses and fungi would thrive beneath the frost, feeding on minerals and faint geothermal warmth. Animals would migrate constantly, following the slow turn of dawn and dusk like nomads chasing balance. Their instincts would no longer be bound to the rising sun but to the rhythm of survival itself. The oceans would reflect this strange rhythm too. On the bright side, the surface would warm to near boiling, forming vast clouds that travel toward the darker hemisphere. There, they would condense and fall as endless snow, a cycle of steam and frost connecting two extremes. Storms would grow monstrous, their size spanning thousands of kilometers, moving not in spirals but in slow, ponderous waves. Each storm could last for months, shifting the climate beneath it with quiet authority. As the sun lingers over one part of the world, shadows grow strange. A mountain might cast the same dark shape for weeks, and valleys that once saw only brief night would sink into perpetual gloom. Plants and animals living in these shaded pockets would evolve unique adaptations, glowing skin, heightened senses, or the ability to live off minimal energy. The boundaries between day and night would blur, not in time but in space, creating a planet of divided ecosystems stitched together by wind. The human mind, so dependent on the rhythm of day and night, would feel the strain. Sleep would lose its anchor. People might rest in segments, closing their eyes for a few hours whenever their bodies demanded, regardless of whether the sun shone or not. Dreams would grow strange in the long half-light, filled with memories of quicker days. Depression and confusion might rise, But over generations, adaptation would come. Humanity would learn to live without the ticking clock, guided by instinct and sky. Technology might help bridge the extremes. Massive solar farms would rise in the endless daylight zones, collecting energy to send to the dark side through global networks. Artificial suns, great rings of orbiting mirrors or glowing towers, would scatter light into regions that never see dawn. The world might come together again through necessity, trading warmth for cold, energy for ice, food for silence. The long day and night would force unity, even as it divides the planet's face. In the bright lands, the air would shimmer with heat, distorting horizons. Winds would move slowly but with immense power, carving dunes into glassy forms. The oceans nearby would retreat, exposing coral turned to stone. Lightning would crack through dry skies, and fires would spread across continents, leaving behind fields of ash. Yet even here, life would persist, small, clever, patient. Perhaps plants that thrive on starlight reflected from the moon, or insects that draw water from dust. The frozen half of the world would evolve its own miracles. Beneath the ice, thermal vents might sustain colonies of life. Glowing algae, worm-like creatures, translucent fish with eyes that see only faint color. Above, in the thin, cold air, clouds of ice crystals would drift, reflecting distant light in hues of pink and green. The darkness, though endless, would not be empty. It would be quiet, profound, a reminder of how life can bloom even when the sun forgets to rise. The twilight regions, those slow-moving belts between extremes, would become sanctuaries. Here, the light would never blind and the dark would never freeze. The air would be thick with mist, the ground soft with moss, and the sky painted in perpetual gold. Rivers might flow forever toward the poles, fed by melting ice and returning rain. It would be a world of whispers, slow speech, soft footsteps, and long, contemplative silences. Here, the memory of balance would survive. If humanity thrives anywhere, it would be here, between eternal day and eternal night. Their homes might glow faintly in the half-light, powered by warmth from deep below. Cities would rise not toward the sun but along the horizon, curved like arcs of hope. Their people would live in harmony with slowness, their calendars marking not hours, but cycles of wind and temperature. They would sing of the sun not as ruler but as visitor, a companion who lingers but never stays too long. Cultural identity would change. Art might become obsessed with motion, paintings of waves, songs of rain, dances that mimic the spinning earth of legend. Myths would grow around the idea of time, of what it once meant to watch the sun move. Children would learn of a world that turned quickly, a world their ancestors lost. Some would dream of restoring that motion, of waking the earth from its slow slumber. But most would find peace in the new stillness, calling it the long balance. And through all this, the sun's light would continue to sculpt the world's surface. The crust beneath the bright side would expand and crack, while the cold side contracts and thickens. Over centuries, the tectonic plates would shift unevenly, creating new mountain ranges and sinking old continents. The Earth's skin, like all living things, would adapt to the new rhythm. The planet, though wounded, would continue to breathe in its own slow way. Animals would evolve with time to mirror the pace of their world. Predators might grow patient, waiting for days before striking. Prey might learn to hibernate for half a year, storing energy during the long light. Wings would widen, legs would shorten, metabolism would slow. Each creature would become a reflection of its environment, enduring, deliberate, wise in stillness. Evolution would no longer favor speed, but steadiness. The oceans beneath the poles would hide secrets untouched by the sun. Their dark waters might foster new intelligence, beings shaped by sound instead of sight. They would navigate by vibration, communicate through echoes, and dream of light they've never seen. Perhaps one day, They would rise to the twilight shores and look upon the dim horizon, wondering at the world that lies beyond. The planet's next inheritors might not need day or night at all. For all its changes, Earth would remain beautiful. The sunsets, when they finally come, would stretch for weeks, painting the sky in impossible colors. Red would melt into violet, gold into deep indigo, until the stars awaken one by one. The long nights would be filled with their glow, constant and gentle. The long days would shimmer with dust, every beam of light scattering into ribbons. It would be a different kind of beauty, slower, grander, infinite. And in that new rhythm, perhaps humanity would rediscover humility. The sun, once taken for granted, would become sacred again, worshipped not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Every dawn, though rare, would be celebrated like a miracle. Every dusk would be a poem of memory. The earth would move slower, but so would our hearts, beating in tune with a sky that teaches patience. In the end, the long days and long nights would not destroy life, they would transform it. The planet would learn a new song, quieter but deeper. The sun's rhythm, once swift and sure, would stretch into eternity. And the earth, bathed in light and shadow that refused to end, would continue a slow dancer in a vast, patient universe, remembering the time when it once spun like a heartbeat beneath the stars. Temperature swings like a slow tide. The warmth and chill of the earth would no longer arrive in daily waves but in immense, drawn-out pulses. On one side of the planet, the sun would stay overhead for months, heating the ground until it cracked, while the other side would remain in shadow, freezing harder with each breath of darkness. The in-between lands, the twilight zones, would be the only places where life could remember what balance once felt like. But even there, the temperature would move in vast cycles, slow and deep, like the breathing of the planet itself. At first, the world would struggle to adjust. Oceans would act as giant buffers, absorbing heat during the endless days and releasing it during the long nights. But the rhythm would be uneven, the bright side would boil while the dark side froze. Winds would form vast corridors of temperature exchange, carrying heat toward the cold half, but never fast enough. The balance would always lag behind, like a pendulum that can never quite find its center. The lands facing the sun would become unbearable. Temperatures would rise until metal softened and sand turned to glass. Forests would wither, leaving only dry silhouettes of trees that once drank rain. Water would vanish into steam, climbing the air in shimmering veils. Even the rocks would expand, breaking apart under their own heat. Mountains would glow faintly under the unending sun, radiating energy long after the light fades. And yet, when the world turned slightly, when the light finally moved away, that same land would cool so quickly that the glassy sands might crack like ice. The ground would hiss as trapped heat escaped, and winds would rush in to fill the new void of warmth. Dust storms, once fierce and fleeting, would now wander for weeks, shaping the terrain with their slow, grinding patience. The air itself would remember both extremes, blistering heat and paralyzing cold, trapped in a cycle that never ends. On the dark side, the cold would rule without mercy. The oceans would begin to freeze from the top down, forming continents of ice that crawl slowly across the water. Each new layer would trap ancient air beneath it, preserving moments of the old world like fossils. The surface would creak under the pressure of expanding frost, and the sky would shimmer with auroras, the only reminder of warmth. Beneath that frozen skin, some heat would remain, the faint exhale of the planet's molten heart, too deep to die. As time passed, this rhythm of heat and cold would carve the earth into two halves of eternal opposition. Glacier would push forward where once there were jungles. Deserts would stretch where once there were seas. Rain would only fall in the borderlands, where vapor meets chill, where heat sighs into cold. These storms would be immense, lasting for weeks, their clouds spanning continents. Each drop of rain would fall heavy with memory, warmth turned to water, darkness turned to weight. Life, stubborn as always, would evolve with these new tides. On the bright side, creatures would burrow deep underground, hiding from the heat, emerging only when temperatures drop enough for survival. Their eyes would be small, their skin pale, their movements slow. In the frozen lands, life would cluster near volcanic fissures and geothermal vents, forming ecosystems of warmth in the middle of endless winter. The twilight zones would host a strange mix of both desert plants beside ice-fed rivers, warmth and chill side by side. The atmosphere itself would pulse with the temperature shifts. Hot air would rise in great plumes from the dayside, dragging with it dust, moisture, and fragments of the surface. It would cool as it crossed into darkness, falling as snow or sleet. This global circulation would form rivers of wind, slow, constant, and ancient in tone. To stand beneath them would be to feel the heartbeat of a world trying to balance itself again. Cities, if they still exist, would have to adapt in ways no civilization ever has. On the day side, buildings would sink into the ground, shielded from the burning sky. Cooling towers would rise like silver trees, catching stray winds. On the dark side, energy would be precious, mined from geothermal sources, shared through vast power networks. In between, settlements would drift, built on mobile platforms that follow the moving edge of temperate twilight like migrating creatures of their own. These migrations might define a new kind of humanity. People would no longer settle by rivers or coasts but by temperature gradients, the living frontier between heat and cold. Communities would rise and fade as the balance shifts, and homes would be built to move. The idea of climate would dissolve. The Earth would not have one, only a constant dialogue between extremes. Each generation would inherit not land, but motion. Over centuries, the oceans would continue to move like great lungs, breathing heat in and out. Deep currents would slow, perhaps even reverse, redistributing warmth in patterns that no longer match any map. Icebergs would drift far into twilight waters before melting, feeding the slow rivers that carve valleys between light and shadow. These water paths would become sacred to those who survive, symbols of continuity in a world where nothing else remains constant. Temperature would become the new measure of time. Instead of counting days, people might mark the rise and fall of warmth. They would speak of the great heating and the long cooling, tracking generations through the breathing of the planet. Festivals might align with the coming of mist, or the first frost melting into dew. The very concept of a year would vanish, replaced by the ebb and flow of energy itself. The animals of the new world would mirror this rhythm. Reptilian creatures might reappear, storing heat for weeks at a time. Birds could evolve wings made for gliding across vast, slow-moving air currents, feeding in the twilight. Insects might sleep through the heat, awaken for the chill, and vanish again into the dust. Evolution would favor patience, resilience, and a kind of inner rhythm, life attuned not to the sun's path, but to the earth's great breathing. Temperature, once an afterthought, would become a sculptor. It would carve canyons, raise mountains, and shape clouds like continents. The great freeze-thaw cycles would break down even the hardest stone, grinding it into smooth plains. Volcanoes might rise on the frozen side, spilling warmth across the ice like spilled fire. On the bright side, cracks would open to reveal glowing magma, releasing the buried heat of the world back into the air. Even the atmosphere's colors would change with the temperature tides. When the heat peaks, the skies would blaze with golden haze. When the cold returns, they would fade into pale blue. At twilight, when balance hovers for a moment, the air would glow in impossible shades, violet, silver, and green, like a dream painted across the heavens. Those brief moments would be cherished, for they mark the turning of the world's pulse. In such a world, survival would depend on understanding temperature as rhythm, not threat. Generations would learn to read the wind, to smell the change in the air, to feel the shift beneath their feet. The wise would say that the earth speaks through warmth and cold, that its language is not lost, only slowed. To live well would mean listening to that language and adjusting one's life to its vast and gentle tempo. Perhaps, in time, life would learn to synchronize perfectly. The bright side's organisms might use the abundance of light to create energy stored in crystalline forms, natural batteries that hold heat and feed the dark side through wind and migration. The frozen side might produce minerals that capture cold, balancing the energy in return. The planet itself could become a closed loop, a single vast system exchanging breath across its silent face. As the eons pass, even the distinction between heat and cold might blur. The atmosphere could grow thicker, redistributing warmth more evenly. The great temperature swings would soften, not by motion, but by balance. The earth would become a slower, gentler place, no longer burning or freezing but resting in a long equilibrium. The slow tide of temperature would continue, but its waves would quiet. And under that stillness, life would thrive once again. Forests might return in twilight regions, vast and silver-green, feeding on diffuse light. The oceans would regain movement, not quick, but steady. Clouds would wander across the planet like dreams, sprinkling mist where once there was only fire or frost. Humanity, if still present, would walk beneath a gentler sky, their hearts beating in time with the long, slow breath of the world. In that final balance, temperature would no longer be an enemy. It would be a pulse, slow, steady, and eternal. The Earth would have found a new kind of motion, not through rotation, but through warmth and cold whispering to one another. And though the days and nights have stretched beyond recognition, the planet would remain alive, a great, breathing heart suspended in space, warmed by memory, cooled by time. Storms change their manners, the Coriolis lullaby fades. Without the Earth's spin to guide them, the storms lose their graceful curves. No longer do they swirl into the elegant spirals that once painted the oceans white. The Coriolis effect, that invisible hand that bent winds into gentle arcs, is gone. Now the air moves in long, straight lines, blunt and relentless. Storms stretch across continents like slow-moving walls of pressure, their rhythm broken, their dance forgotten. The winds no longer sing their circular songs, they simply push and fall, heavy and tired. The old hurricanes are no more. In their place rise vast sheets of moving air, storms without centers, tempests without eyes. They do not spin or rage in patterns but instead crawl across the land like shifting mountains of wind. There is no calm eye at their heart, only relentless motion. The air, unanchored by rotation, becomes raw and untamed. The atmosphere's once graceful ballet devolves into something ancient and primal, a pure struggle between heat and cold. Where the bright side scorches, columns of rising heat stretch into the upper layers of air, and without spin to twist them, they rise straight upward, like pillars of fire. They pull moisture high, forming thunderheads so tall they pierce the stratosphere. Lightning webs across them. Not in flashes but in long, branching trails that linger for seconds, illuminating the ruins of the horizon. The sound rolls not as thunder, but as a deep hum that lasts, trembling through the air like the Earth's low voice. On the frozen side, storms are different, slower, quieter, heavier. They fall as blizzards of fine crystal dust, each flake more ice than snow. These storms don't swirl but crawl, spreading like blankets that weigh the land down. They can last for weeks, even months, drifting with the faintest whisper of moving air. Beneath them, the world becomes buried in layers of silence, a landscape muffled into stillness. Nothing breaks through their curtain but the faint gleam of auroras above. Between the extremes, in the twilight band, the two types of storms meet, fire and ice, heat and frost. When their edges collide, the atmosphere folds into itself, creating endless grey tempests that circle the border of light and dark. Here, winds blow not with fury but with deep, rhythmic persistence. They are the breath of the new earth, exhaling and inhaling with the patience of ages. These winds shape the twilight deserts and carve the shifting dunes, erasing old marks of civilization. Rain in this new world is not gentle. It falls as a steady, heavy pulse, sometimes warm enough to steam on contact, other times freezing midair. Storms no longer come in seasons but in slow migrations. One could travel with a storm for a lifetime, born under its clouds, living beneath its rain, and dying before it passes. It becomes less a weather pattern and more a world unto itself, stretching horizon to horizon. Lightning becomes the new artist of the skies. Freed from rotational constraints, it leaps from cloud to cloud in vast lattices, connecting air masses miles apart. Some bolts even strike sideways, crawling across the ground like rivers of light. Each flash reveals the new face of the planet, the broken coastlines, the steaming plains, the endless fields of frost. At night, if night can still be called that, lightning becomes the only motion visible, a slow heartbeat illuminating stillness. The oceans too grow restless beneath this new order. Without the Coriolis force, currents lose their jives, those gentle, spiraling dances that once carried warmth across hemispheres. Now, water flows straight, north to south, east to west, dragging along silt and life alike. In some places, it pools into stagnant basins, in others, it crashes endlessly against unchanging cliffs. The seas lose their rhythm, becoming vast mirrors of chaos and calm. The storms above and the waters below become one. Evaporation and condensation merge into a slow cycle, massive but inefficient. Clouds may linger over one place for years, releasing rain until the soil itself becomes part of the sky's mood. Then, just as suddenly, the air dries, leaving nothing but cracked earth and distant thunder. The planet breathes in bursts, slow inhalations of moisture followed by long silences of drought. In the absence of spin, even the jet streams, those invisible rivers of air that once circled the globe, collapse. Without them, weather no longer travels swiftly, it drifts. A single storm system might take decades to cross from light into dark, its shape changing with the slow exchange of heat. To future generations, the sky will seem nearly still, a frozen canvas painted with eternal storms. Over time, the atmosphere begins to layer itself differently. Without rotational mixing, heavier gases sink, and lighter ones rise. The balance of air shifts slowly, subtly changing the way the world breathes. Oxygen thins near the surface, carbon dioxide pools in low valleys. The wind carries scents unfamiliar to human lungs, metallic, dry, electric. Breathing becomes an act of patience, each inhale a small negotiation with the new air. The surviving life forms adapt in remarkable ways. Plants develop skins that resist wind abrasion and roots that cling fiercely to whatever ground remains. Some even evolve to sway slowly, responding to the long rhythm of passing air fronts rather than brief gusts. Animals, too, become shaped by stillness and endurance. Feathers thicken, hides harden, and many species move in herds that follow the faint promise of calm air. In the human enclaves that persist, weather becomes sacred. People build wind towers to capture its power, to turn turbines that hum with the memory of the planet's lost spin. The sound of constant wind replaces the ticking of clocks, it becomes the measure of life's passing. Some call it the Earth's breath, others call it the ghost of rotation. Either way, it is a sound that never stops, a reminder that the world still moves, even if the ground does not. Mythologies return, shaped by weather. Cultures might begin to worship storms not as threats, but as gods of motion. Legends would tell of the old spinning world when storms danced, not crawled. Children might listen to stories of the Coriolis lullaby, a tale of a time when winds swirled like songs. In their still skies, those stories would feel like dreams, too graceful to believe, too old to forget. Over centuries, the planet finds a new rhythm. Storms begin to settle into predictable paths, tracing the borderlands of light and cold. These lines become the veins of the new Earth, transferring moisture, energy, and life. The atmosphere, though wounded by imbalance, heals into a new order, slower, quieter, but stable. The winds are softer now, no longer shrieking but sighing. The storms have learned to sleep. Lightning still paints the sky, but it too slows. It becomes less violent and more deliberate, striking in grand arcs that move like slow handwriting across the horizon. The electric fields that once danced with urgency now hum with continuity. The sky glows faintly even when calm, a permanent aurora, a soft illumination of air and memory. In the oceans, the lack of rotation allows deep layers to rise, bringing ancient nutrients to the surface. This feeds vast blooms of new life, glowing algae, drifting creatures of light. From space, the seas shimmer softly, alive with bioluminescence. It is as if the Earth has replaced its lost spin with radiance, trading motion for luminescent calm. The winds that once tore through continents mellow into low, steady flows. They move not as storms, but as whispers. Over time, they sculpt the land into smooth curves, erasing mountains, softening valleys. The face of the Earth becomes gentle again, its scars polished by air's slow hand. In the end, it looks like a memory of serenity, a world remade by patience. And somewhere, within that patient air, the faint echo of the Coriolis lullaby remains. Not in spirals or storms, but in the way clouds curl softly at their edges, hinting at motion long gone. It is a ghostly rhythm, a forgotten melody woven into the wind's hum. For those who listen closely, it sounds almost like breathing, the quiet, endless breath of a planet learning to live without its spin. So the storms change their manners, but not their soul. They are slower now, deeper, more ancient. They no longer rage as they once did, they murmur. The Earth, unspinning, has found peace in its weather. The Coriolis lullaby may have faded, but in its absence, the world hums with a new kind of music, low, vast, and eternal. The song of stillness. The planet's shape and the pull you feel would gently shift. Without its spin, Earth would begin to change its form. The bulge at the equator, caused by centuries of rotation, would slowly relax. Gravity would pull the planet into a more perfect sphere, inch by inch, year by year. The crust would creak and adjust, mountains subtly shifting, oceans migrating toward the poles. The ground beneath your feet would not tremble all at once, it would sigh, settling into a new balance. And as it did, you would feel the faintest difference, as though the planet were exhaling after an eternity of tension. The pull of gravity would feel stronger near the equator and weaker toward the poles. It wouldn't be something you'd notice in a single step, but over time, it would change how everything sits and moves. Rivers would adjust their courses. Seas would slide toward the colder regions, deepening the northern and southern oceans, leaving dry plains where tropical waters once shimmered. Islands would become hills, continents would stretch ever so slightly, and the balance of the world's weight would find a new rhythm. At first, humanity might not believe it. The stars would remain unmoved, the sun still hanging in the same sky, but tides would whisper that something has changed. The air would seem denser, the pull of the earth slightly firmer. You would feel heavier, not because of fatigue, but because the world's embrace has tightened. It would be as if gravity itself had grown lonely for the motion it lost, clinging harder to everything that remains. As the equatorial waters slide away, coastlines would transform beyond recognition. Cities once by the sea would find themselves stranded miles inland. Coral reefs, robbed of their warm currents, would fade into pale skeletons. Meanwhile, the polar regions would swell with new oceans, deep, strange, and still. Ice would melt under the pressure of depth, and what once was frozen land would drown in slow silence. The map of Earth would redraw itself, not in sudden catastrophe, but in steady, patient erosion. Mountains too would shift their shapes. Freed from the slight outward pull of spin, they would stand taller, their roots pressing deeper into the mantle. Yet erosion would continue to wear them down, now helped by the heavy rains and the new winds of a still world. In time, the tallest peaks might seem closer to the heavens, but the air around them would thin, stretched by gravity's new balance. What once were summits would now be thresholds, edges of a calmer, heavier sky. Even the air would feel different. With no rotation to spread warmth, pockets of atmosphere would thicken and thin in strange places. The air near the equator would grow heavy with pressure, while the poles would feel strangely light. Standing on the edge of the new oceans, one might feel the sky pressing harder, the weight of the unseen world settling on shoulders and breath. Sound would carry farther, slower, resonating differently, as if the world had learned a new way to listen. Animals, especially those sensitive to the pull of gravity, would sense it first. Birds would fly lower, their wings adjusting to heavier air. Fish would migrate to deeper waters, following new pressure lines across the planet's rearranged seas. Even trees would grow differently, their roots twisting toward stability as the soil beneath them subtly shifts its balance. Evolution would quietly begin rewriting itself, not out of crisis, but out of the Earth's slow reimagining of gravity. Deep below, in the molten core, the redistribution of mass would cause new murmurs. The magnetic field, born from motion and spin, would falter. Without rotation to drive it, the field would weaken, wobbling like a flame in a dying breeze. Aurora lights might scatter unpredictably across the sky, no longer confined to poles that have drowned beneath oceans. The compass, once faithful, would spin without direction, reflecting the confusion of a planet relearning stillness. As the equatorial crust relaxes, earthquakes would ripple through ancient fault lines. These would not be sudden, explosive disasters but slow movements, the kind you feel through the soles of your feet before you hear them. Buildings would tilt, riverbeds would shift, and the world would seem to breathe through its ground. Humanity, used to tremors of destruction, would find itself in a time of quiet adjustment, a global stretching, like muscles easing after a long, tense sleep. People would speak of gravity differently. It would no longer be a silent constant but a presence, something that feels alive. You might notice your own weight varying ever so slightly as you move north or south, your steps changing their rhythm. It would be as though the earth were gently reminding you that you belong to it, that it has you firmly now, no longer distracted by its spinning dance. Over centuries, this shift in shape would sculpt a new equilibrium. The equator, once the widest belt of the planet, would shrink inward. The poles, once pinched, would round and soften. The Earth would become smoother, more symmetrical, a perfect pearl floating in space. From orbit, it would gleam evenly, no longer stretched or bulged, no longer wearing the marks of motion. It would look restful, content, almost peaceful in its new stillness. The loss of that bulge, however, would have quiet consequences. Satellites that once circled easily would drift unpredictably, their orbits unmoored from the shape they once depended on. Space itself would need to be recalculated. The skies would become strange for those who look up, constellations steady, but our machines wandering. Even the moon's pull would behave differently, tugging on a planet that no longer pushes back with rotation. Tides would be weaker, slower, perhaps even sentimental. If you were to stand at the equator, you would feel it most. There, where the planet once spun fastest, everything would feel slightly different. The horizon might seem nearer, the air thicker, the ground subtly firmer beneath your feet. You would feel more connected, as if the earth beneath you were holding you just a bit closer. That embrace would be comforting, but also heavy, a reminder of motion lost, of a rhythm gone quiet. The oceans, finding their new basins, would reveal ancient secrets. Long-buried ridges and sunken lands would rise, still dripping with salt and memory. Perhaps fragments of forgotten civilizations would emerge, remnants of coastlines from eons past. The sea's retreat from the equator would expose strange creatures long hidden from sunlight, blinking against a world rediscovered. The Earth, in stillness, would show its old face once again. Over time, this new arrangement would become the planet's natural shape, not forced, but earned. The poles would deepen with oceans that glisten beneath steady skies. The equator, now dry and wide, would host endless plains and deserts, vast and echoing. Life would migrate toward the coasts of these polar seas, where warmth and water still find each other. Humanity, if still here, would follow, adapting to a quieter world of balance. Gravity's new uniformity would bring a strange serenity. The seas would calm, waves shrinking without rotational force. The tides would move like sighs, barely noticeable but constant. The wind, too, would slow, settling into deep, predictable flows. Weather would lose its wildness, and the world would begin to feel steady. For the first time in its long history, Earth would truly rest. And yet, in that stillness, something would be missed. The faint tug of rotation had once given everything a sense of direction, east and west, sunrise and sunset, the endless turning that carried life forward. Now, without it, orientation would blur. The sense of morning and evening would fade, replaced by simple brightness and shadow. The planet's heart would keep its beat, but the melody of time would soften into a hum. Perhaps, after many millennia, that perfect roundness would become the planet's quiet pride. No longer bent by its spin, no longer distorted by haste, Earth would be a sphere of calm equilibrium. It would float through space like a patient elder, still, shining, and wise. From afar, it would appear as a mirror of balance, a world that once danced and now meditates. And to those who walk upon it, the pull of gravity would feel like a heartbeat, steady, loyal, familiar. Every step would be a reminder of connection, every breath a small exchange between body and world. The planet's shape, though changed, would feel right. The shift in pull, though strange, would become comforting. For in the absence of motion, the Earth would have found something new, the peace of being perfectly itself. The planet's shape and your weight upon it would both tell the same story, one of quiet adaptation. The Earth, once restless, has settled into a slower truth. And you, standing under a motionless sky, would feel not fear, but belonging, the gentle certainty that everything, at last, has found its place. Deep inside, the slow dance of the core might change its tune. Beneath the crust, in that secret heart of molten metal, motion is constant, iron and nickel flowing in patterns older than continents. This churning gives Earth its magnetic breath, its shield against the sun's fierce particles. But when the planet stops spinning, the balance is disturbed. The liquid metal, no longer stirred by the outer world's rhythm, begins to slow, to settle, like a great ocean after a storm. The heartbeat of the core would find itself in confusion, searching for a new song to hum. At first, the changes would be subtle, too deep to feel from above. Yet within that immense pressure, motion is everything. Without the steady tug of rotation, convection currents might weaken, twisting less boldly, breaking the symmetry that has long defined the magnetic field. The North and South poles, those quiet invisible anchors of navigation and protection, might waver. Lines of magnetic force could distort. Like smoke in still air, uncertain of their path. The compass would lose its purpose, spinning aimlessly over a planet that has forgotten which way is north. As the molten core struggles to adapt, the layers around it would begin to whisper their complaints. The mantle, thick and restless, depends on heat flowing upward from below. A slower, less turbulent core would mean uneven warmth, strange new patterns of movement, perhaps even new volcanoes born from cracks of adjustment. Deep fissures might open under the seas or through the plains, releasing the stored breath of Earth in quiet, glowing rivers. The planet, long in balance with itself, would begin a slow, painful reshaping, a turning inward of forces long accustomed to motion. In time, the weakening of the magnetic field would grow more severe. Without that invisible shield, the solar wind, a stream of charged particles from the sun, would strike the atmosphere more directly. Auroras would blossom in strange places, curling over skies near the equator. But beauty would be a warning here, a sign of protection fading. Radiation would begin to seep more deeply into the upper air, altering chemistry, disturbing ozone, letting more ultraviolet light reach the ground. The stillness that began as silence might end in a shimmering, dangerous glow. Humans might first notice it not in sight but in the quiet breakdown of machines. Satellites would fail more often. Power grids would flicker and spark. Compasses would betray their keepers, pilots would drift, and migratory animals, whales, birds, turtles, would lose their invisible maps. They rely on magnetic whispers to find their way through the world, and now those whispers would turn to noise. Across forests and oceans, paths would vanish, instincts would falter, and the great migrations of life would stutter to a confused halt. The deep core's slow surrender would echo upward in ways few could predict. As molten flows change, they might stir unevenly, awakening strange patches of magnetism in random places. One region might glow with power, while another falls silent. Maps of the magnetic field would resemble a painting smeared by an unsteady hand. The Earth, once wrapped in smooth lines of force, would instead wear a patchwork cloak of fading energy. The shield might not vanish entirely, but it would falter, letting space reach closer than ever before. Geologists would listen carefully, lowering instruments into the Earth, hearing what the rocks say. They would find new tremors, not violent, but steady, patient, like a deep sigh. The planet's equilibrium would need time to find itself again, perhaps thousands of years. For a while, molten metal would continue to turn, driven by memory, by inertia, by its own strange sense of purpose. Yet without the dance of rotation to keep it lively, that memory would fade. The great internal orchestra would grow quieter, each instrument slowing until only the faintest hum remained. The consequences would not all be destructive. Some might see in the new stillness a chance to understand, to study the Earth's inner being without the veil of motion. With sensitive instruments, scientists could perhaps hear the planet's true tone, the slow resonance of its iron heart. They might learn things never known before, how deeply the layers breathe, how heat rises and flows when unshaken. The loss of spin might give birth to knowledge, a stillness that reveals truths long blurred by speed. Yet there would also be melancholy in that revelation. The magnetic field has always been more than a shield, it has been a companion to life, a quiet protector. Its slow fading would feel like a farewell, as if the Earth were dimming a lantern it no longer needs. In the deep time of geology, other worlds have lost their fields, Mars, for instance, whose once thick atmosphere was stripped away when its core fell silent. Our planet might not suffer so dramatically, yet echoes of that fate would linger like a shadow of possible futures. Underneath the continents, the crust might begin to flex in subtle ways. Without the stabilizing pull of rotation, tectonic stresses could change. Old boundaries might crack open anew, some mountains might rise while others sink under their own weight. The ground would shift like a sleeper rolling in uneasy dreams. Even the oceans above would respond, as the seabed adjusts to the new balance. Deep trenches could grow deeper, while mid-ocean ridges could slow their spreading. The planet would be learning how to stand still, something it has never done before. In laboratories and observatories, theories would bloom like strange flowers. Scientists would model the magnetic decay, the altered heat flows, the new shapes of the core's convection. Some might suggest that after a time, the inner movements would find a new rhythm, a slower but stable beat. Others would whisper that the dynamo would die completely, leaving Earth exposed and quiet. Between these Predictions lies the uncertainty of nature, that mystery that humbles even the brightest minds. The changes deep below would not happen overnight. For years, maybe decades, humanity might not notice. But the invisible lines of force, those protective threads, would unravel little by little. Compasses would drift by fractions, then by degrees. Birds would migrate off course by hundreds of miles. The auroras would spread, growing stronger, wider, painting the sky in soft greens and reds even at tropical latitudes. And slowly, the Earth's song would become one of fading magnetism and stilling motion. Perhaps, in the deepest layers of molten iron, something would resist the silence. Tiny eddies might persist, like echoes refusing to die. They would swirl for centuries, remnants of an old dance, creating pockets of magnetism that flicker and fade. These would be the dying notes of the planet's core symphony, soft, haunting, and beautiful in their persistence. The Earth would not go quietly, it would linger between motion and stillness, half remembering its ancient rhythm. Above, the people watching the skies would see unfamiliar constellations shimmering through auroral veils. The stars would seem brighter against the long nights, unbroken by the old 24-hour pulse. The magnetosphere's collapse would let cosmic rays paint faint streaks across the atmosphere, invisible yet constant. The world would feel both more open and more vulnerable, as though the very air had become thinner, less certain, less protected. The connection between surface and space would grow more direct, more intimate. Somewhere in the dark, the oceans would murmur their approval or discontent. Their salt carries electric currents that once intertwined with the magnetic field. Now those currents might change direction, altering how tides and circulation patterns flow. Perhaps this, too, would reshape climates subtly, not with violence, but with patience. The deep sea would begin to tell a new story, one where stillness above echoes in the heart of the abyss. There would be a poetic balance in all of this. The same energy that once made compasses spin and auroras dance would return to rest. The Earth, long spinning in a cosmic waltz, would finally pause to listen to itself. The silence would be immense, not empty, but full of meaning, full of memory. Deep inside, the core would continue to hum for a while, a lullaby from the planet to its surface, reminding all life that movement, even slow and hidden, is what keeps the world alive. Eventually, new equilibrium would come. The molten flows might settle into layers, heat rising quietly, finding peace without chaos. The magnetic field, now weak and fragmented, would stabilize at a lower hum. The Earth would no longer be the same, yet it would endure, patient, ancient, adjusting as it always has. Perhaps a new kind of harmony would emerge, a quieter one, where stillness becomes its own form of motion. In that silence, humanity might learn reverence again for the deep, unseen processes that sustain the world. We would look not just to the sky for meaning, but inward, beneath our feet, where the true heartbeat of the planet resides. The loss of spin would remind us how deeply every current, every tremor, every invisible flow connects to life above. We might finally understand that the Earth is not a rock beneath us, but a living rhythm we share. Over centuries, the planet's story would continue, reshaped by what it lost and what it found in stillness. The magnetic memory would linger in rocks, in fossils, in ancient sediments, preserving a record of motion long gone. Future beings, if they ever came, might read those marks and know that once the world spun joyfully through the void. They might sense, in that fossilized magnetism, a whisper of music, a trace of the song the core once sang. And though time would wash over everything, seas, skies, civilizations, the deep core would remain, dreaming beneath. Its molten rivers would move slower now, patient as stone, but never truly still. For even in stillness, heat moves, pressure flows, energy finds a way. The Earth's heart would continue its slow, enduring pulse, a reminder that even when the world stops turning, life and motion, in some quiet form, always go on. The silence of the stopped earth would thus not be death, but transformation. The slow dance of the core, now gentle and introspective, would give rise to a different kind of balance, one no longer ruled by speed, but by memory. And in that new rhythm, faint and deep as the heartbeat of eternity, the planet would still sing, softly, endlessly, beneath the calm of the unspinning sky. Life would find new ways, after the first storm of change. When the chaos settles, when the winds lose their rage and the oceans rest in their new beds, something tender begins again. The plants that cling to cracks in stone, the microbes buried in permafrost, the seeds that waited in dry soil. They would stir, cautiously. The sun, now a slow companion instead of a daily visitor, would offer long stretches of light and long hours of dark. It would confuse the rhythms of what once lived by dawn and dusk, but some would learn to bend, to adapt, to breathe in the altered cadence of time itself. The creatures that once depended on cycles of day and night would face a trial. Some would falter, others would evolve. In places where daylight lasts for months, photosynthetic life would thrive, drinking in the endless radiance, storing energy in ways never needed before. In the long nights, bioluminescent species might bloom across the seas, painting the darkness with ghostly blues and greens. Life, stubborn and creative, would not surrender. It would shift its form, its schedule, its song, in harmony with the new stillness of the planet. On the twilight border between eternal day and eternal night, that soft band where dusk never ends, ecosystems would flourish. Here, warmth would balance cold, and light would blend with shadow. It might become the cradle of new diversity, a place where survival doesn't mean dominance but balance. Strange forests might rise there, with plants whose leaves absorb every glimmer of light, and animals that move slowly, conserving energy in the steady calm of a sky that never truly changes. Humans, if they still walk this earth, would learn the art of patience again. The spinning of the planet once dictated our clocks, our rituals, our sleep. Without it, time would stretch like a long breath. Societies would adapt to regions of light and dark differently, the bright side becoming a land of mirrors and energy, the dark side one of quiet, introspection, and warmth drawn from the earth itself. The thin line between them might become a new frontier, the home of balance seekers, dreamers, and those who remember the old world's pace. Cities might not vanish but transform. On the endless day side, they would shine like clusters of crystal, designed to reflect and manage the sun's glare. On the long night side, they would glow softly, powered by geothermal heat and auroral light that shimmers endlessly across the frozen sky. Humanity would build not to dominate, but to harmonize. With no rotation to divide time, there would be no night shift, no sunrise, no alarm, only cycles of work and rest guided by the inner rhythm of each soul. In the oceans, currents would find a new purpose. Without the Coriolis effect, the great gyres would weaken, but new streams would form where heat and cold struggle to find balance. Marine life would follow them, migrating not by season but by thermal gradient, tracing invisible paths through still water. The deep sea, untouched by light and shadow, would remain a sanctuary, a memory of the world before stillness, where life hums in timeless quiet, unchanged yet eternal. Plants would become the storytellers of this new age. Some would stretch toward the light, their leaves thick and reflective to survive the constant sun. Others, on the night side, would burrow deeper, feeding off mineral warmth or learning symbiosis with glowing fungi. Evolution, patient as always, would sculpt beauty from necessity. Forests might whisper in colors unseen before, leaves tuned to gather faint starlight, roots laced with bioluminescent veins. Life's creativity would not dim, it would simply find new rules to play by. Animals, too, would rediscover their rhythm. On the bright side, predators might evolve translucent skin to reflect sunlight and stay cool, while prey would learn to blend with reflective sands. In the night side, Warmth and glow would become defense and attraction alike. Eyes would grow large, sensitive to the faintest glimmer, or vanish entirely in favor of other senses. The eternal twilight regions would be the meeting grounds of these two worlds, the place where adaptation meets poetry, and survival becomes art. Humans might discover new ways to live in companionship with the land. Agriculture would no longer be seasonal, it would follow zones of light and dark. Fields on the bright side would yield endless crops, but only with careful rest cycles, while in the dim regions, underground farms might bloom, nurtured by geothermal power and soft light. Our understanding of growth, work, and time itself would become circular, patient, a mirror of the Earth's new calm. Perhaps in the deep future, cultures would grow that no longer think of days or years. They would measure life in pulses of temperature, in migrations of wind, in auroral storms. Myths would form about the old spinning world, tales told under skies that never changed, about a time when sunrise and sunset ruled the heart. Those stories would feel like dreams, relics of a forgotten motion, but they would keep alive the memory of the Earth's once rapid dance. The magnetic field, though weakened, would not be forgotten either. In its absence, humankind would learn to protect itself. Differently, through science, through resilience, through cooperation. Technology might rise to mimic what the planet once gave freely, shields in the sky, artificial auroras to deflect radiation. Yet, even in this reliance on invention, there would be humility, a quiet respect for what nature once offered without asking. Over millennia, evolution would weave new symmetries. The bright side might develop species of crystal-skinned beings that harness light directly, while the dark side could nurture heat drinkers, creatures with slow pulses, living centuries in shadow. The thin zone of twilight might birth hybrids, life that bridges extremes, breathing both fire and frost. Diversity would not vanish, it would deepen, as life finds ways to endure the great stillness. The oceans, now calmer, would cradle new coral-like organisms glowing faintly in the eternal night. Their bioluminescence would serve as both beacon and language, a living Morse code across the abyss. Above them, floating mats of photosynthetic microbes would bloom where sunlight lingers, transforming seas into shifting continents of green and gold. The boundary between sea and land might blur, as new forms occupy every available niche of light and dark. Human understanding of energy and survival would change as well. The reliance on solar patterns would fade, people would seek constancy in geothermal warmth, in stored light, in the rhythm of tides now driven by the moon alone. Villages might form around vents and fissures, places where the planet's inner warmth reaches the surface. There, fire and water would mingle, symbolizing the last heartbeat of Earth's deep motion. Life, over endless generations, would forget the word spin. It would come to know only balance, not between day and night, but between presence and absence, between heat and cold, between movement and stillness. The sky, fixed and calm, would become a map of eternity. The stars would never rise or set, they would simply exist, steady companions to creatures that no longer measure time in circles, but in whispers. And yet, in this deep adaptation, traces of the old rhythm would linger in memory. Some plants might still close and open their leaves, out of instinct carried from ancestors who lived under dawn. Some animals might sleep in cycles that no longer have purpose. Even humans, resting under a fixed sky, might dream of sunrise, a light they never saw, but somehow remember in the marrow of their being. The Earth, though changed beyond recognition, would not be lifeless. It would hum with slower energy, a patient pulse that moves through roots, oceans, and molten stone alike. The silence after rotation would not be absence, but a deepened presence, a chance for the planet to listen to itself, and for life to harmonize with a quieter world. In time, new beauty would arise. The bright side's deserts would shimmer with minerals that sparkle like stars, and the night side's glacier would glow faintly with embedded light from auroras. Between them, the twilight belt would host gardens of impossible colors, illuminated by both reflection and flame. The still earth would become an art piece in motionless space, a living canvas of contrast and adaptation. The long centuries would teach all creatures the virtue of patience. In a world without spin, urgency would fade. Everything would happen slowly: growth, decay, discovery. It would not be a lesser world, only a calmer one. The pace of thought, of change, of feeling would slow to match the planet's own. Life would find peace in rhythmless time, and even death would seem gentler, part of a vast, unhurried continuum. Eventually, the story of Earth's stillness would become one of quiet triumph. From chaos and fire, through darkness and adaptation, to balance and endurance, the planet would prove, once again, that life does not end when motion does. It transforms, softens, becomes something new. And so, under skies that never move, in oceans that whisper instead of roar, life would continue not as it once was, but as it must be, eternal in its patience. And in that infinite twilight, where stars and horizon meet forever, something deeper would bloom: understanding. The realization that motion is not life's only song. Stillness, too, can hold its own music. Life would learn to listen, and in that listening, find not sorrow for what was lost, but awe for what endures. The earth, though silent, would hum again, softly, steadily, in the rhythm of everything that chose to remain. Finally, the world settles into a new, quieter rhythm. The chaos has faded, the last of the storms has calmed, and the planet breathes differently now, slower, deeper, unhurried. The oceans, once wild with inertia, have found their places, cupping the continents in their still hands. The air no longer rushes to chase a spinning sky, it drifts gently, following the warmth that lingers where the sun gazes long. Everything has found a slower pulse. One that no longer belongs to a day or a night, but to a steady continuity of existence. The earth has learned, after its long dance, how to simply rest. In that stillness, sound itself changes. Winds no longer roar, they murmur. Trees no longer sway to passing gusts, their branches stretch unbroken toward the horizon. The world's music becomes subtler: the deep cracking of ice at the edge of eternal shadow, the soft lapping of lazy tides, the slow creak of roots growing in silence. Every sound feels deliberate now, sacred even, as if the planet's voice has decided to speak less but with more meaning. The quiet is not emptiness, it is presence refined. Light, too, has learned patience. On the bright side of the earth, the sun's rays stretch endlessly, painting the land in hues of amber and white. Shadows grow long and constant, never chased away by evening. On the dark side, the faint glow of auroras and starlight turns the ice into mirrors of the cosmos. The boundary between light and dark is no longer fleeting, it is a permanent twilight, a band of gold and violet where warmth and cold hold hands in an eternal embrace. It is there that life gathers, drawn to the comfort of balance. Humans, in this reimagined world, have changed their ways. The idea of time has softened, hours have lost meaning, days no longer marked by sunrise or sunset. Instead, they live by rhythms of need and rest, of warmth and coolness. People wake when their bodies tell them to, sleep when peace finds them, and measure their lives not in schedules but in breaths, heartbeats, and stories. The mechanical tick of clocks has given way to the quiet pulse of living things. Civilization continues, but slower, wiser, gentler. Technology endures, but even it reflects the new stillness. Solar panels tilt toward the endless sun, harvesting energy in steady abundance, while the night side draws warmth from the Earth's interior, geothermal veins glowing like arteries beneath the ground. Cities are no longer sprawled in haste but designed in harmony, circular and reflective, cradled by the contours of the land. They hum softly, built not to dominate but to endure. The age of speed has passed, the age of balance has begun. Across the bright plains, vast forests of silver-leaved trees shimmer in constant sunlight. Their roots dig deep into the soil, pulling moisture from hidden aquifers. They have adapted to the endless day, their leaves reflective, their sap thick, conserving every drop of life. On the far side, under auroral skies, fungi and mosses thrive, feeding on minerals and faint radiance. Bioluminescent flowers bloom in colors that once had no name, lighting the eternal night with gentle glows. The earth has found a way to be both a world of fire and of shadow. Animals, too, have become different. The constant light has given rise to creatures with mirrored scales and pale fur, while in the darkness, eyes have vanished in favor of sensitive skin that feels the faintest tremor of sound. Migration, once tied to the sun's movement, is now guided by temperature and instinct, a slow circulation around the twilight band. There, in the place where the world's extremes meet, life gathers like a chorus, each species adding its note to the slow, resonant song of adaptation. Oceans, calmer now, carry their own still beauty. Their waves move with purpose, no longer whipped by storms but guided by deep currents that stir with the planet's quiet breathing. The sunlight that falls eternally upon half the sea feeds blooms of plankton that shimmer like liquid glass. In the shadowed waters, new creatures rise, long, luminous forms that move through the depths with the grace of thought itself. Even the abyss seems to glow faintly now, lit by the lingering heat of the earth's molten heart. Above, the sky has settled into new moods. On the bright side, clouds drift in slow procession, casting soft-moving shadows that cross the same landscapes for centuries. Rain comes rarely but meaningfully, heavy with minerals and warmth. On the dark side, the auroras never fade. They ripple in endless waves of green and violet, as if the planet's lost magnetic pulse still hums faintly, painting its memories across the night. Stars no longer rise or set, they simply are, eternal and unblinking, the quiet witnesses of this rebalanced world. The magnetic field, though weak, continues to breathe faintly, flickering with life. It no longer shields the planet as before, but its soft pulse still caresses the upper air. Radiation dances gently through the atmosphere, changing the colors of dawn that never comes. Yet even this, once feared, has become part of nature's new art, a force that guides mutations, fuels bioluminescence, shapes evolution. The cosmos has leaned closer, and the earth, in stillness, listens. Deep within the ground, the core spins slowly, sluggish but alive. The molten iron no longer swirls as fiercely, but it glows steadily, maintaining the planet's warmth. Its movements are patient now, like the turning of thoughts in a sleeping mind. The dynamo that once roared now hums softly, and that hum resonates upward through stone, water, and air. The Earth's magnetic song has quieted, but it still sings, faintly, beautifully, in frequencies too low for human ears to hear. Civilization has grown inward as much as outward. Without constant change, humanity has turned to meaning. Art, philosophy, and contemplation flourish. The rush of progress has been replaced by the richness of presence. People sit beneath steady skies and paint not the fleeting moments, but the infinite ones. They build libraries that stretch underground, filled with thoughts instead of noise. Knowledge, like the planet itself, has slowed to a steady pulse, deep, thoughtful, and enduring. Children grow up in a world without hurry. They learn from stars that never move and oceans that no longer rage. Their dreams are calm, full of endless light or soothing darkness. They hear stories of the spinning world that was, of sunsets, seasons, and nights filled with crickets, and they listen with wonder, unable to imagine such rapid beauty. For them, eternity is the norm, and stillness is home. The new world feels not broken, but complete. The bond between human and planet has deepened. With no rotation to divide time, people no longer feel apart from the Earth's rhythm, they live within it. They sense temperature shifts like moods, they read the air like a language. In the absence of constant change, they find connection with each other, with nature, with the breathing of the soil beneath their feet. The earth no longer spins for them, it simply exists with them. Even the moon looks different now. Without the daily spin, it hangs in a fixed place in the sky, always watching. Its craters glow softly, reflecting the sun's steady gaze. It becomes a symbol of constancy, a silent guardian. People build temples in its honor, not of worship but of gratitude, a reminder that some things need not move to inspire awe. In the quiet of the unspinning night, the moon's stillness feels like a friend's heartbeat beside your own. Weather, though calmer, still breathes. Warmth drifts slowly across the dayside, rising and falling in waves that last for years. Cold spills softly from the night side, shaping frost that glitters under auroral light. The balance is delicate but stable, a kind of atmospheric meditation. The planet has learned to breathe like a sleeping giant, deeply, rhythmically, content in its unhurried state. There is poetry in this slowness. The world that once spun itself dizzy has found peace in pause. The rivers move like threads of silver, unbroken and unbothered. Mountains erode at the same pace they grow. Even erosion, even decay, has softened its urgency. Nothing races anymore. Nothing chases. Every process, from growth to ruin, has become an act of grace. And in that grace, beauty takes new forms. Crystals grow in sunlight for centuries, catching the same ray of light that never fades. On the night side, the ice sings when the wind touches it, low notes that resonate across frozen plains. The planet has become a gallery of still wonders, each detail polished by time, not motion. It is the art of endurance, the serenity of forever. In this new rhythm, even the stars seem closer. The silence of the earth echoes into space, and perhaps, in some distant corner, other worlds hear it, a hum of peace instead of motion. The cosmos listens, and the earth, though small, shines in its stillness like a lantern that never flickers. The absence of spin has not dimmed its soul, it has revealed its depth. And so the story of this world ends not with destruction, but with transformation. The wild spinning has ceased, but the essence of life remains, slower, quieter, eternal. The earth has found its final rhythm, one not measured in revolutions, but in the quiet persistence of being. Everything that breathes, grows, and remembers now moves to that same deep pulse. In the end, silence does not mean absence. It means peace. And in that peace, the world continues, softly lit, gently alive, perfectly still, and beautifully awake in its endless, quiet dream.